Hello and welcome to today's video where we'll talk about full cost recovery. By the end of this video, hopefully you'll have an understanding of what full cost recovery is and what it entails, and you'll have the confidence to submit funding bids, ensuring that you're covering not just the direct costs of your project, but any other costs. So, who's ever submitted an application for project funding only to find out when you delivered the project it didn't cover all the costs? Quite a few of us, right? So what we're going to cover in today's session is what is full cost recovery, what costs can be included, and the steps you need to take when undertaking full cost recovery. So what is full cost recovery? Well, full cost recovery means securing the funding for all the costs involved in running a project. This means that you get funding for both your direct project costs and a proportionate share of your organisation's overheads. So what costs can be included in full cost recovery? Well, you'll have the direct costs of a project and you'll have the indirect costs of a project. What I would always say is read the funding guidelines really carefully because some funders can be quite strict about what indirect costs can be included. So let's talk about direct costs. So what are the direct costs of the project? Well, they're any project staff. Don't forget to add on your employer's costs. For example, employer's national insurance, employer's pension, if it's a multi-year project, any planned pay rises, and any other costs that relate to an employee. For example, employee assistance programs, recruitment costs if you're recruiting new staff for the projects. Then we've got things like the activity costs. So what is it actually going to cost you to run the project? So for example, will there be things that you need to buy to run these activities? Is there any rent or room hire for the place where you're going to be running this project from? And are there any other costs? For example, postage, IT. If you employ a new person, will this person need a mobile phone? Will they need a laptop? Will they need a desk? Will they be added to any contract you have with any IT provider? These are all additional costs that you need to consider and you will incur. So make sure that you put them in your project bid. Next, we're going to talk about the indirect costs. So, for example, these are other staffing costs, administration, finance, the cost of supervising the project staff, any buildings, rents, rates, utilities or repair costs that relate to any indirect staffing, any administration costs, for example, printing and copying, postage, office supplies, and any other costs, for example, legal and professional fees, bank charges, accountancy fees, governance costs, fundraising costs, basically any other costs that your organisation incurs in its day-to-day running that could be attributed to the project. So what I want you to do now is take a minute to think about the direct and the indirect costs that may relate to a specific project for your charity. I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. So, once we've identified the direct and indirect costs, we then need to think about allocating those indirect costs. So there are several different methods you can use. There's the headcount method. So this is based on the total number of staff that you have in your organisation and the total staff working directly on the project. So for example, say you have a team of 5 overall and one of those is going to be working directly on the project, you could allocate 1/5 of your overall indirect cost to that project. Another method you can use is floor space. So think about the floor space that you currently take up, the floor space that's being taken up by the project, and then do a percentage of that. And then another one is the percentage of total expenditure. What I would say generally is stick to one method rather than mixing and matching. Obviously, you can mix and match because some things are more applicable to go by headcount or floor space or percentage of expenditure. So, for example, what you might decide is any indirect staffing costs you're going to allocate on the headcount method. But any indirect costs relating, to example, to rent rates and utilities, you're going to allocate on the floor space method. Now, if you're confident in doing this, that's great. Be a spreadsheet provided that will help you work this out. But sometimes it might just be easier to stick to one method. So what are the steps in allocating your indirect costs and coming up with the total cost of your project? So first of all, review all your organisation's costs and identify for that project which costs are direct and which costs are indirect. You're then going to calculate the direct costs and then calculate the indirect costs. Once you've calculated the indirect costs, think about what the best method is for allocation. Apportion them. Then once you've got both your direct costs and your indirect costs, add them up, and then as always, just double check. So that was a really quick whistle-stop guide to full cost recovery and what it entails. A spreadsheet's been provided to help you with this, including allocating your indirect costs, your direct costs, and also working out your employee costs, including employers' NI and pension. Thanks for listening today, and I hope you found this helpful.